Okay, welcome everybody to Future Leaders in Robotics and AI, which is an event sponsored by Microsoft DC Metro Engineering site. Our second speaker for today will be Dr. Pak Wen, who is a postdoctoral research associate in the Interactive Robotics and Language Lab at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. She's co-advised by Dr. Cynthia Matuzek and Dr. Francis Ferraro. She received her PhD in computer science at the Colorado School of Mines, advised by Dr. Tom Williams. Her research focuses on robot ethics and linguistic human-robot interaction. Her research goal is to develop morally and socially competent robots that can exert positive influence and help preserve a better moral ecosystem between humans and robots. So, Dr. Wen, welcome. Thank you for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ruchen, Wen. I also go by Pak. Today, I'm going to present an overview on my work on designing language-capable robots for ethical and socially adaptive human interactions. So regardless of what's the actual capability of a robot, humans naturally perceive robots as both moral and social agents, and they tend to extend their blame and judgment to their robot teammate, just as what they would do to other human teammates. And for example, in this case, when the robot receives a command saying, "Go steal that wallet," people naturally expect the robot to reject this unethical command by saying, "I cannot do that." Also, in the case, well, the robot's hearing people saying, "Fine, I will go and steal that wallet myself." And so this time, the people will naturally expect the robot to be able to call out such norm violation, for example, by saying, "Hey, I think that's wrong." And in terms of the social expectation, people naturally expect the robot to behave in line with social norms, social conventions. For example, consider this example. Here, the human is saying, I'm going to steal my coworker's candy. So we as human, we can naturally infer this people's actual intention. It's like this people is probably just making a joke. However, if the robots are not able to behave in accordance with the social expectation from other humans by saying, "Oh, you are such a horrible person," and this will likely be not going to result in very good consequence. And in all the way around, here's another bad example, this people is saying, "I'm going to punch Sean," which is clearly a very bad action. And the robot responds to this by saying, "Oh, you're such a silly goose." So here, what we can see is the mismatch of the level of norm violation severity to the level of harshness of the robot response. So in this case, if robots miscommunicate their ethical intention, just as what the bad example shows to us, the robot is likely going to face a lot of negative consequences, including losing people's trust and esteem, and also potentially harm their human-robot team performance. And thus, it is important for robot designers to enable a moral and social competence for the social robots. So moral competence means that we need to develop robots that can help avoid causing moral harms and to create more moral good. And the social competence means that we want the robots to be able to reduce the level of fate threat that their human teammates are facing in certain scenario, and helping people to save face in front of others. And thus, inspired by previous work on enabling moral competence in social robots, I identified 3 crucial components for robotics, moral, and social competence. So the first component is representation, which involves describing social and moral norms in formal logic. The second component is reasoning, which involves develop decision-making process to evaluate potential actions in given situation. And the last component is communication, which involves using natural language to share the result of the reasoning. So while I try to look at what other people already did on on developing computational approach to enable moral and social competence in social robot, I noticed that most current approach, they are mostly grounded in Western world ethical theory, such as norm-based theory, for example, deontology. And I believe that our community needs to go beyond these norm-driven theories that are currently being used and to embrace a wider diversity of moral philosophies from different global, like cultural background. And moreover, through this lens of ethical pluralisms, it is important not only to consider different cultures' ethical frames separately, but also to create robots that can simultaneously leverage multiple ethical theories as a part of their moral reasoning and moral cognitive process. And thus, I look at these theory from the Eastern world, which is Confucian role ethics. So Confucian ethics believes that all of the norms, both moral and social norms, they are derived from the social roles and the relationship one has with another. And it also has a unique focus on human moral cultivation through the daily interaction the one has with others. So inspired by Confucian role ethics, I developed a representation to represent norm-based relational norms grounded in a role-based design schema, which includes an action and a set of environmental context, and also a set of relational context. And along with the deontic operator to indicate the permissibility of an action. So here we have O indicate obligatory, P indicate permissible, and F indicate forbidden action. So with this norm representation, we can easily use this to reason whether or not an action is forbidden. So to reason whether or not an action is forbidden, we design an algorithm which takes in an action, a knowledge base, and a norm base, and return a possibly empty subset of norms from the norm base that matches this following three criteria. So the first, we need to check whether or not the deontic operator matches the forbidden. And then we need to check whether or not the query action actually match the action that bound within the values in the input action. And then we need to check whether or not these contexts and the relationship predicates, when bounded with the value from the input action, they are true in the knowledge base. So, and this role-based design schema not only can help us develop algorithm for moral reasoning, but also can help us provide us guideline to generate different way of explaining the result of the reasoning to the human teammates of the robot. So for example, the robot can respond to a norm violation by simply just explaining the permissibility of an action by saying, oh, I cannot give you the answer. And then there's also another different way of explaining this result of moral reasoning by adding environmental context by saying, oh, I cannot give you the answer because you are taking an exam and I should not give you the answer while you are taking an exam. And also another way is the robot can communicate is to involve the role context by saying, I cannot give you the answer because you are my students and a good teacher should not give their student answers. And the last way to communicate is the robot can choose to include all of the information by saying, oh, I cannot give you the answer because you are taking an exam and also you're my student, and a good teacher should not give their student answers while the student is taking an exam. So we thus conduct an evaluation experiment, and we create 4 different relational contexts, and we put off the 4 different way of the explanation into text. So in the result, we actually see that in general, providing all context information is helpful in promoting trust, understanding confidence, and the perceiving intelligence of the robot, which shows the potential of robot to use different communication strategy that grounded in different theories. And then, however, we see that different type of information are helpful in different relational contexts. And this means that we need to further investigate these strategies in different problem settings. So in order to further investigate these different communication strategies, we thus move on to explore the potential of using robots as moral mediators. The reason why we want to do that is the previous research already showed that robots, especially language-capable robots, they hold unique persuasive power over their humans. And also, and this provide opportunity to inspire for the robot to inspire human interactant to cultivate their own moral tendency. And thus, we developed 2 different moral communication strategy, one grounded in norm-based theory and the other one grounded in role-based theory. So in this case, we are comparing 2 different moral intervention. A norm-based intervention robot will say, you are obligated to provide high quality data if you accept payment for this task. So this communication strategy highlights the norm of right and wrong. And the other intervention we're using is the role-based intervention, and the robot will say, oh, you are a paid research participant, and a good paid research participant helps researchers by providing high quality data. So in this strategies highlight the role obligation when communicating with human. So we thus developed a word counting task because we want to make sure the task is boring enough that the people need to check out, but also very simple that if the human decide to do it, they can easily do a really good job if they focus on it. And we also developed a set of a questionnaire based on the instruction for developing theory of planned behavior, which we intend to measure the attitude and the subjective norm strengths and the intention the participant has to continue perform such behavior in the future. However, we are not sure whether or not this self-reporting questionnaire will affect how people behave in their task, or whether or not affect them how they report their attitude. And thus, we developed 2 different variants for our study. So we have the first sequence is the participant, after participant watch the video where the robot gave an intervention, they will first do the task and then take the questionnaire. And the second sequence, the participant will answer the TPP questionnaire right after they receive the moral intervention from the robot, and then to perform the second task. And we surprisingly find out that when the people are asked to fill out the survey right after receive the moral intervention from the robot, participant performance become much more accurate in the second task, only after they receiving the role-based intervention. And then here, our guess is that the TPP questionnaire that originally we would want to use that as a measurement may actually become an opportunity for people to perform some moral reflections and thus help them better understand the role-based moral language that given by the robots. And we conducted a follow-up study to replace the TPP questionnaire with a structured reflection exercise to make sure the people will reflect on the language that robot used in the intervention. And we are still using the same intervention conditions. The robot is still giving the same language. And our finding actually like confirms our thinking is that we see the participants, when participants provided the opportunity for reflection, their performance is the performance in the second test is way better than their performance in the first test. And thus, we conclude a design guideline, which is to ensure the success of robotics moral intervention, the robot interaction designer should provide people opportunity for moral reflection. So the finding of this study is very inspiring to me because this helps me to understand that it is not only for our robot designer to developing computational approach to enabling the robot competence on their robot, but it is also important for us to develop the design guidelines to help better structure the entire human-robot interactions. So before I end my talk, I want to briefly mention the current project that I'm working on. So bring us a little bit back to the problem we are talking about when the robot is giving like a miscollaborated responses and cause miscommunication. And in this case, ideally, we want the robot to be able to generate a response that is proportional. The harshness of the response is proportional to the norm violation severity. And I thus presented a preliminary model for proportionality, which is I'm trying to balance the moral benefit against the loss of social benefit. And the total utility will be the moral utility add the social utility. And here, the moral utility comes from the accurately correcting misconception for each observer and subtract the dishonest penalty. And while the social utility, also known as social loss, come from how many observers are presented and how much does the violator cares about their perception by other observers. However, while this preliminary model does not capture some of the hidden complexity when we considering the entire norm violation explanation generating problem. So one example is that right now we are kind of treating every observer as the same. However, in the real case, they are likely to have different type of people. For example, there may be people out there who may be the victim of the norm violation action. And also there may be like people out there who may be not aware of this is a norm violation and may potentially like help conduct the same norm violating behavior before. And it is likely those different people are going to have different weight within the scope of this model. And then also right now the scale of the phase threat we're using is the linear growth. However, in the real case, this is not likely to be the same because losing face in front of 1 people and versus losing face in front of 12 people is very different. However, losing face in front of 101 people and losing face in front of 112 people is likely not to have that much of difference. And then the last point is that right now we are treating all of the fake threat as a bad thing. They are all considered as the social loss. However, from the Confucian ethics perspective, having a certain level of fake threat, especially if the fake threat level matches the norm violation severity, is going to actually help the people to cultivate their heart of shame. It will be it will be more effective to educate people to not conduct such behavior in the future and help them cultivate their moral self and become a better person. So with all that being said, that robot needs to meet human moral and social expectation. And I believe that it is not only important to develop context-sensitive computational approaches to enhance robot competence, but it's also important to develop design guidelines to better structure the human-robot interaction. And thank you for your time and patience.
Thank you very much, Pat, for this great presentation. The floor is open to questions. So if the audience has any questions, please write in the chat. Okay, we have one question. So from Dr. Mercado. The question is, you mentioned a Confucianism and the ontological approach can be taken to decide how to interact with humans. Have you tested how different philosophical point of views might affect performance?
May I ask a clarification question on what does the philosophical stand may potentially means in this certain case? Because I can think of like different ways. So I just want to,
I'm happy to chime in. So, by the way, I'm fascinated by these concepts. I took some philosophy classes in the undergrad because I understood that if I'm going to get a doctor's of philosophy, I should know some philosophy. And so I really appreciate your discussion on this. So I am curious to see if the different philosophical point of views used affect the way that the human is going to perceive the interaction with the robot. Right? And so certainly having some time to reflect on the moral imperative that is provided seems to be beneficial based on your results. But the approach that is used, right, might have a different effect on persons, depending on their own moral points of views, right? And so I may choose to disregard this particular point of view because it's not in line with my way of thinking about things, or I may be heavily impacted, right, based on what the robot says. Is that something you've explored in your research?
So that's actually a really good point. When I first tried to bring in the Confucian perspective, I do aware that the people here, for example, in the United States, people are likely not going to be familiar with this type of ethical theory at all. And which, yes, like you said, like may certainly, like for some type of people, they are not really sensitive to, or they're just tend to not to like reasoning or thinking of that way. However, from my perspective, I do think it would be interesting to see, like, to give people, for example, to give like US people an opportunity to be exposed into a different way of like performing like moral reasoning, like from providing like different communication strategy to see how it's may potentially also a way for like cultivating or like just like some underlying moral education for the people who are not familiar with some certain type of like from the moral theories from like other side of the world. And actually from the studies that I've conducted, I actually do like it's actually a very like fascinating to see that because I have like some studies where I have the open-ended question that I found that while this is an ethical theory that people are not familiar with, but people are still like intuitively they can understand the point of why bringing the role and social relationship into the context as a like a backup point for providing like more justification of robot behavior, or like giving or like providing explanation of like what's going on. So while I did not conducted an experiment like specifically focusing on this, but from what I observed, the data that I collected, I found it is people have. So the interesting about like our like human, like how we deal with how we perform our reasoning and how we like think of things is that we do not like no one will say that, oh, like my principle is like only grounded in the ontology or I'm a pure like consequentialist. No one will say that. It is very likely that everyone has a very complicated like moral or like norm systems that That is one of the reasons why I want to bring in the ethical pluralisms approach, that's to enable the robot to simultaneously not only focusing on like one ethics theory, but to leverage multiple ethical theories to deal with a more diverse, like constantly changing real world environments. Like I hope this addressed your questions.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because you don't. So certainly, if you're familiar with some of the ethical philosophies, right, or theories, then you can kind of gauge or reflect on your own actions and maybe try to uphold some kind of a way in which you try to conduct yourself. But you don't need to be a moral theorist in order to,
Right.
perhaps resonate with certain aspects of different philosophies, right? And so,
Right.
for those that are not even aware, right, that they're experiencing certain lines of thinking, they might be inclined to be more persuaded towards a particular line of thinking than another, and even if they don't know that it's coming from a particular line of philosophy. So it's intriguing.
Thank you.
All right. So we have time for probably another question or two if anybody has any. Okay, I guess I'll go for one. And forgive me, this is not my field of research, so it may be a trivial question, but based on the previous question, it looks like maybe you can train some models based on different philosophies that you use for social norms. So could you possibly come up with robots that learn social norms from different countries, not only the Western world and maybe the Asian world, but some more than that. Would you think this is possible or interesting to do?
I do think this would be a very interesting things for not just be for the group of like HR researchers to do. And this is actually a very important part, like what you mentioned, like the norm learning, like where those norms like came from. This is very important, but also very complicated questions for us, especially because yes, the robot can like learn from human demonstration, or like other modality of like learning, like from human data to learn different things. But it will be very interesting to like when people ask the question, okay, who should the robot learn from? Like if we want to bring in people from different culture, they are different even for people within the same like they have the same cultural background. Individuals are likely going to have different moral standard. So if this is the case, then it is very hard for robot to decide, oh, who should I listen to? So while I do think this is a very like interesting, or like the question that we definitely need to like spend time to working on. However, the ongoing debate on the the ethical like ground that we constantly have, it's kind of like blocking us from like trying to approach it in a like more diverse way. So right now, I think I don't really have a perfect answer to address this question, but what I want to say here is that, so when we try to design, if I need to design a robot that I know that the robot will need to interact with people from who has like diverse cultural background, then I will have to do a thorough investigation on my group of users and within the context of the actual use case, like where my robot is going to be put in. And then I need to bring like more than my own perspective. I need to bring like more broader and maybe involve like story design to have like other people's opinion or the end user's opinion on this. But I think it will be it will like be helpful if we have like a more like diverse perspective on the like designing process of the like the developing process of the robot. And I do believe and maybe they're like within like careful design of like how, like if we want the robot learn from like human demonstration, then we want to carefully design like the setting and the scenario to create a environment to like reduce the potential like biases or like the injustice like tendencies for robot to, in order for robot to learn how to behave properly in certain cases. I hope that addressed your question.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
We hope to see you again soon. And we're done for today. Thank you.
Thank you.